And welcome to CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Democrats trimming the president's massive spending bill and one major change, scaling back the highly controversial plan to have the IRS gather more information on bank accounts. And an Israeli scuba diver discovers an ancient sword off the coast of Israel. We'll tell you how it ties into the history of Jerusalem. Plus, China looking to expand its control over the digital world, not only in its own country, but globally.
If you go back into Chinese history, back around, 2,500 years ago to almost the present, there have been many regimes in China that have tried to control everybody.
See what obstacles the Chinese could face. And if you want to know how to have fun, check in with children.
We should ask kids what sounds fun to them in hopes that we will teach them, man, the way God made you is great.
Our Studio 5 conversation with author Annie F. Downs as she helps children find joy with her new book, What Sounds Fun to You? Those stories and more are ahead today.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
Begin this half hour in Washington, where the Democrats may be getting closer to a deal on President Biden's huge social spending and climate change plan. West Virginia centrist Senator Joe Manchin and Vermont independent socialist Bernie Sanders are trying to work out a way forward by the end of the week after strong public disagreements.
All right, we're talking.
The American people want us to act, and I think we're going to have to aggressively come together to do that.
One controversial measure, Democrats are scaling back the Biden administration's plan that was supposed to crack down on tax cheating by having the IRS collect information on every bank account with more than $600 in annual deposits and withdrawals. Democrats raised that to $10,000, but Republican senators blasting it as a government invasion of privacy.
So what will happen if they actually implement this? Americans will lose their privacy. Private information is going to be provided about them. The IRS won't know what to do with it. They'll just get flooded with massive number of individual and small business accounts for which it'll have a dollar amount that means nothing.
Even with the changes, Democrats on the Hill are skeptical the bank reporting measure will be included in the final version of the spending plan. Meanwhile, President Biden remains low in the polls. The latest Quinnipiac poll showing him at 37% for his job approval rating and 52% disapproval. And 52% say the country is worse off than it was a year ago, while 41% believe it is better off. The Food and Drug Administration is expected to approve this week the mixing and matching of COVID-19 booster shots, but it's anticipated the agency will say using the same brand for a booster is still recommended. Mark Martin is on this story.
The FDA's expected authorization of mixing and matching COVID-19 booster shots is likely to come along with the approval of boosters for the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson shots. Authorities approved a booster for the Pfizer vaccine for many Americans last month. Still, a U.S. health official says the agency is expected to recommend using the same brand of a booster.
We now know that J&J wanes more quickly than the mRNA vaccines, and being able to give more options to patients is important.
There is some evidence that a booster with an mRNA vaccine will provide more benefits for people who received the one-shot Johnson & Johnson. A limited study found that an additional dose of the same Johnson & Johnson vaccine boosted antibodies by 4 times. Boosting the J&J shot with Pfizer caused antibodies to jump 35 times, and a Moderna booster increased antibodies 76 times. Still, some who received the J&J vaccine want to keep the same booster brand.
I'd rather stay with one course and just keep it that way.
Vaccinations are lowering the number of COVID cases nationwide. A CDC analysis released Tuesday showed the Pfizer vaccine is 93% effective at preventing hospitalizations of 12 to 18-year-olds. But cases and hospital admissions are on the rise in 10 states that experience colder climates as more people gravitate indoors.
I really do not want to see another horrific fall-winter wave like we saw last year, and I think it's possible.
Meanwhile, experts want more intense research of new COVID variants. At least 6% of cases in the United Kingdom are what's known as AY4.2, a descendant of Delta. COVID deaths spiked at their highest level since March in the UK. U.S. researchers are also tracking that subvariant.
from the data that I've seen, cases of the AY4.2 have been seen in about 5 states, maybe about 7 cases total.
Scientists seeking to learn if it's more easily spread.
We need to remain vigilant, whether this variant will turn out to be a problem or not. Until this is controlled everywhere in the world, we all remain at risk.
Going forward, a CDC advisory panel will debate and vote on the mixing of vaccine booster shots on Thursday, with the CDC director making her final recommendations shortly after that. Mark Martin, CBN News.
I want to turn now to Israel, where a scuba diver has discovered an ancient sword off the country's Mediterranean coast. And as CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports, experts say it dates back to the time of the Crusaders.
Israeli Shlomi Katzin was scuba diving in the Mediterranean Sea off the northern coast of Israel when he discovered the 900-year-old sword.
The most interesting thing is that this is one of the first, or as I know, complete sword that ever found in Israel and in a very good preservation. We know that usually under the water, the materials, the archaeological materials survive better than on land.
Katzin also found stone anchors and pottery fragments on the seabed. The finds were apparently uncovered by the waves and undercurrents that shifted the sand. Fearing the sword could be stolen or swept away by the currents, Katzin took it ashore and turned it over to the Israel Antiquities Authority. Katzin received a certificate of appreciation for good citizenship.
Because of the area where the sword was found, not so far from the Crusader castle of Atlit, which is a Templar castle during the early 13th century, we are assuming that it belonged to the Crusader period because of the size, because of the other artifacts that belong to the site.
The Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099 AD and set up their kingdom here. They ruled the area of the Holy Land for nearly 200 years.
Following the weight of the sword, we assume that the knight that hold this sword was very strong, because to fight with this weight and this size of sword, it wasn't so easy. Even today, to hold it, it's heavy.
The IAA says every artifact that's found helps to piece together the historical puzzle of the land of Israel. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, a closer look at China's ambition for control of people through digital media beyond its borders and the global threat it could pose. We got the story for you when we come back. China's communist leaders are convinced they can not only control the country in the online world, but they can dominate the digital world globally. Our Mark Martin spoke with Dr. Ted Baer about the growing concerns over China's plans.
But China has a different world than we have. In fact, if you go back into Chinese history, back around, 2,500 years ago to almost the present, there have been many regimes in China that have tried to control everybody, and this just gives them better control of everybody. I don't think it's going to work, but I don't have a crystal ball. I'm a Christian. I don't believe in crystal balls, but I do not think this is going to work for long, because the amount of data that they're going to be collecting is just atrocious. I don't know if people, because every country, there are people that want to be free, whether it's Muslim Uyghurs in China, or whether the Christians, there are a tremendous number of Christians in China, almost as many as in the United States, are under extreme pressure. And I know several of them, not many of them, but several of them who've taken my class in How to Succeed. There are people who have taken my class in Singapore. So there's just a tremendous number of people who want freedom. And I've got to point out one thing. There's a movie a couple of years ago, won the Berlin Film Festival and several other film festivals, called The Lives of Others. It's about the Stasi, which was the communist police in East Germany, and it was the best at gathering data. And it's about a man who's posted across from the theater industry, the apartment building where the best director and the actresses live. And his whole life is listening into them. He's living the lives of others. Stasi collected so much information that the government collapsed. They had aircraft hangars full all over East Germany, full of files and files and files on people. And at some point, you lose track of it. So whether the artificial intelligence is going to help it to become manageable, I doubt it. I think even with all the best, but maybe we've moved to the point that actually artificial intelligence can get them to realize an age-old Chinese dream and communist dream of completely controlling everybody, which would be very sad. And this doesn't start with China or communism. It starts with Sparta, where they did the same thing. So this has been man's foible for a long time when you make government God instead of God God.
Dr. Baer, what evidence are you seeing of this?
Well, you see evidence all over the world. I mean, they're trying to do this in Venezuela and Cuba. You also hear friends of ours that are Chinese who studied with my son at Chinese University, which is considered the Harvard of China, that have moved to Australia and to New Zealand and elsewhere. And they've got family trapped in there. You can't do anything. You're completely paralyzed from saying or doing anything because you're going to get bad social credits. It's a very oppressive situation. And it's sad because, Xi himself, the Prime Minister of China, at one point was considered to be the most free market, but he was just in disguise. And we can give you a long history of communism, that many of the worst and most brutal leaders, like Stalin, were in disguise. Nobody understood that Stalin was playing the end game. And when he took over, he destroyed everything. And he lied about Lenin appointing him and all that. So this has been going on again for a long time. And the evidence is in people's lives that are being destroyed. And probably the next group of people whose lives are going to be destroyed is Taiwan. And I love Taiwan. And I've been there several times. So all of this is very problematic.
Should America and the free world be concerned about this influence that China has with apps and digital technology, and even China's dominance with microchips for computers and phones?
We should be. And the problem is that, and I know, I came to Christ late in life, my late 20s. And I had been a card-carrying member of a communist organization because I thought that was the solution so Jesus saved me from that sort of worldview. But there have been so many people who've educated in that worldview that if you go into any event, if you go to next door in California about, I call him Governor Gruesome or whatever else, you hear people who want to have the government control every part of their lives. And of course, the consequences is the homelessness and all the problems we have today.
What should America and other nations be doing to change this when it comes to digital spying and even with the technology production dominance?
Well, one, we should stop focusing on redesigning our population's sexual preferences and everything, and start focusing on science, start focusing on mathematics, as we say in the article. As I said, I worked for NASA for a year as a research engineer, and we used slide rules, and we got a rocket to the moon. Somebody has to start thinking about getting back to the basics and stop doing social justice and critical race theory and all the garbage today. But that's from somebody who used to be the head of a department at Berkeley and City University, New York. I just think we've completely sold out our past, and therefore we've sold out our future, as de Tocqueville said.
All right, Dr. Ted Baer, thanks for your insight, sir.
Still ahead, a great question for you and your children. What sounds fun to you? All part of a new project for kids that could bring you hours of joy. Stay with us. When it comes to a good time, no one knows how to have fun like children do. But these days, even they can use some fresh ideas for finding fun in their lives. That's where author Annie F. Downs comes in, helping children to find joy with her new book, What Sounds Fun to You? This week, Studio 5 is sitting down with the author to talk about the project. I had no clue you were a teacher.
Yes, can you believe it? People
Not
left
that
me in
that's
charge
a
of their
surprise.
children's lives. Yes. 100% true. I got to teach elementary school for 5 years. I did 2 years of 5th grade and 3 years of 4th grade. So I always stayed in that like higher elementary world, but I loved it.
So it's only natural that you would write a children's book then.
Yes.
Tell me what gave birth to this book.
Well, you know, Ephraim, what happens a lot when I ask adults, I mean, you and I had this conversation when That Sounds Fun came out a few months ago. When I talk to adults and I say, tell me what sounds fun to you, they always start with, in fact, you did it. I've never forgotten your answer. They always start with, oh, I don't know if anybody else is going to think this is fun, or I don't know about this. You may not like this. And there's this like tiny bit of shame attached to our grown-up fun. And it's because when we were kids on the playground, there was like one thing that was cool and everything else wasn't cool. And so we started learning, well, whatever I think is fun needs to go in the back seat compared to what everyone else says is cool. And so then when we started thinking about, I mean, I ask everybody, because the show is called That Sounds Fun when I have them on the podcast, what sounds fun to you? I thought we should ask kids what sounds fun to them in hopes that we will teach them, man, the way God made you is great. The way you are is just fine. You don't need to like what everybody else likes. Just like what you like. And so that's kind of our hope with this book, is that kids will see themselves in it and see this opportunity they have to really appreciate the way they were uniquely made.
Now, you said to ask kids. Have you heard from kids what sounds fun?
Oh my gosh, you're going to love this. Okay, so most of the kids in the book are kids I actually know. The illustrator, Jenny Poe, is incredible, and I sent her pictures of all these kids that are in my real life, and she illustrated them into the book. So on the cover is me in the center, and then my friend Kiki with her little hair buns, and then my friend Sam on the other side of me. I mean, those are real kids. So the fun thing was, Ephraim, they didn't know. I had gotten permission from their parents, but the kids didn't know. And so I brought them all into our podcast studio, and I sat them down and I said, does that person look familiar to you? And their eyes would light up, and I'd say, I think that's you. And they would say, I love playing soccer. I'm playing soccer in this book. I love playing soccer. And so that's one of the great things about what Jenny did as the illustrator, and what we did when we created this book together, is I wanted every kid to see a kid who kind of looks like them, whether it's an ability level or a hair color or a skin color or a thing they love to do. So we have kids of all different skin tones. We have kids with hearing aids and wheelchairs, glasses, and we've got kids playing outside. We've got kids reading books. We've got kids in the garden climbing a tree. We just wanted kids to find themselves everywhere and go like, because here's what's true about you and me too, when we read fiction, is that if we can see ourselves in the story, we believe the lesson of the story. And so I wanted every kid that picks this book up to see themselves somewhere so that they believe the book.
I love it. What lessons do you think we adults can pull from a book like this, and kids, period?
I mean, isn't it the truth that when we read picture books to kids, suddenly we're the ones? I mean, it's why people can't get through Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when they're reading it to their kids, because of what the story means to us when we see Aslan save the day, right? And so for me, I think my hope is that as grown-ups are reading this with kids, whether it's in their churches or in their classrooms or in their homes or with the kids in the neighborhood, is that the parents are also going, I miss doing that. I miss, there's a page with a grandmother and a granddaughter, and the grandmother looks so much like my grandmother. And I don't even know that Jenny meant to do that as the illustrator, but so even on that page, I have this moment of pause and go, man, I miss my grandmother. What a beautiful memory. How can I be that kind of voice in some other people's lives, even though I'm not a parent or a grandparent yet? And so I just go, man, are there going to be people who like have a really good memory of the instrument they used to play, or the thing or even there's a page that it's probably my favorite illustrated page of looking up at the stars. I'm like, man, what if everybody just finished the book and looked outside and saw what was up there and what God had made. And so that's my hope. And man, we have so much to learn from kids, don't we? They just, if they love you, they run towards you, right? If they love you, they run towards you. And so it's just things like that I go, man, if I love someone, I should just run towards them.
And this week, Studio 5 has a complete eye to children. We're going behind the scenes of a new animated series from rapper Ludacris. And we have a look at the film Clifford, the Big Red Dog, which now has a release date. You can catch the all-new Studio 5 this evening at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. You can find that on the CBN News Channel or on the CBN News app. Coming up, a firefighter rescues a kitten, and there's an even better happy ending for both. We've got the story for you. Stay with us. Welcome back. It took 2.5 months, but there's a happy ending for a little kitten rescued by a firefighter in Michigan. People magazine reports that Brandon Mulvaney, a Saginaw, Michigan firefighter, and his family have adopted the kitten he rescued back in August. He told reporters he knew almost immediately he'd adopt the cat, and it took him more than 2 months to make it official. Mulvaney and his first responders had a call that a kitten was trapped in a storm drain. He then crawled through a pipe more than 10 feet to find the kitten, and when he called out for the cat, it actually peeped out of a smaller pipe. That's when he grabbed the little fella and carried him out. He says he knew at that moment that he wanted to adopt the kitten because he came right to him. He and his family have named the kitten Huntley after one of the streets near the intersection where he was rescued. Time now for your Wednesday word, and today's word is dream. Know this, it is never too late for God to move on that dream you may have long forgotten. If you're not dead, He's not done. And it's never too late for you to begin a new chapter in life or even begin writing an entire new book. With that word, I encourage you to make today a wonderful Wednesday. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We would love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com, and you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Again, I encourage you to make it a wonderful Wednesday and join us right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye. God bless.